Okay, I've got an absolute catastrophe. It's of my own creation. I installed a piece of software called Zulip in our live server that hosted our email, that hosted our websites for our clients, our email for clients, our own business server environment, and it frickin' hosed everything. And it's a well-known program called Zulip. It was an extremely invasive installation. Started asking questions about Samba, and there was all kinds of things in front of me that I knew were danger. And sure enough, the server wouldn't reboot. No internet, no reboot, total frickin' nightmare. Before this happened, I used ZFS to create a snapshot of the server environment. Now, I've never done, or I've done it, with another developer in a very protected environment with no, and nothing on the server that was any value. Now I've got a situation that's mission critical. Everything on the server is of value. Soon enough, our phone's going to start ringing with people wondering why their websites are down, why their email's down. It's an absolute nightmare situation for any server administrator, and I'm guilty. I put us there. I just got off the phone with a developer, Francis, over in the Dominican Republic, who is very familiar with ZFS. I need somebody with more knowledge in this area than I do, even though I'm learning as though I was getting ZFS through a fire hose. So let's see where we're at. Hi there. Well, it is the next day, and I am ecstatic and relieved to tell you ZFS saved my bacon. And I'm going to show you exactly what I did to get out of this. And I've documented the process, and I'm going to attach a PDF document for you so that you can use this to walk through your own recovery process if you have in fact used ZFS in a root environment and need to restore it. It brought us back to square. Everything is exactly like it was to begin with. So I would imagine, I don't care if you had ransomware, I don't care if your server blew up in the way that mine blew up, ZFS has got your back, and I will never have a server install without ZFS on a root level from this point forward. Take a look at how we resolved it. All right, I'm going to read this directly from the documentation with screenshots in between. First of all, we booted to a live media. Could be desktop, could be server. It's up to you, whatever you've got on hand. Is a bootable media required? In our test case that I've used once before, we are actually able to do a root snapshot rollback without bootable media. I'm sure that that's the way it went. I don't have it recorded, but we created a single file called test.txt. We rolled back, we created a snapshot. Before that, we rolled back the snapshot and test.txt was gone. So it didn't work in this particular case, or at least I think it didn't work. I will tell you that the reason I thought it didn't work is because I had no internet when it was all said and done. But when I think back, I was messing with some things relating to secure server certificates, and it changed the permission of those certs, and that broke our DNS, and it could be that it had nothing to do with the root failing, and that because when it was all said and done, and I did fix this thing from a root, I still had no internet, and I had to fix those perms on the SSL. So it's still unclear to me whether this can be done without the boot environment or with the boot environment. But one thing for sure is if you do this booted to a dedicated live desktop or server install media, you take everything else out of the picture. It basically can't fail because you're still attached to the root operating system. And for that reason, that's the way I decided to go. So let's move on. In our example, our corrupted data is on an Ubuntu 22.04 server. The USB live media is ready to begin. For the record, our router's gateway IP is 192.168.9.1. Yours will be whatever it is. You may not even need to know what that is unless your router is serving your server via a static IP. If it's DHCP for any reason, you don't need to know what your router's gateway IP is, because you're not going to be setting up networking manually. In the first part of this video, I'm going to walk you through using a desktop live media. Then beyond that, I'll walk through those same steps using a server live media, and then we'll get to the part what they both have in common, which is the ZFS work itself. So from a desktop, you'll insert the media, boot to it. It's going to ask you if you want to try it or install it. You definitely want to try it. If you hit install, you're going to wipe out your server, so you don't want to do that. Then we're going to skip to the network configuration. If your router is providing internet to your server via DHCP, then you don't need to configure anything. We can going to skip this section. But if your router is providing a static IP to your server, which in most cases I think it will be, you're going to want to click on the network icon in the top right, or wherever your network icon is on your version of Linux. We're using Ubuntu 22.04, and go in and make those changes. And you see, for example, here, enter the net mask, the IP address of your server as you would expect it to be from the router, the gateway IP, and any the DNS. In our case, we're using 8888, backed up by 8844 with a comma in between. Again, this is for Ubuntu. You may your nomenclature and where you're putting things may be different, but you get the gist of it. Now, once you've got your network settings in there and you hit OK, you should be getting some confirmation that you are in fact connected to your server, and you should have internet. And if not, you're going to have to revisit that. Okay, go to the terminal prompt. At this point, hold on your Control Alternate and press the letter T key, and that'll get you to a terminal, or you can use some kind of desktop navigation. Either way, get to your terminal. Now let's talk about the server install media. Hold it right there, desktop people, because we're going to be coming back to the very same place as a server. On the server, select English as your language when you boot. Select your keyboard layout. You're going to go into, next going to be prompted for network configuration. Same thing as with the desktop. If you're using DHCP, which again most servers are not, but if you are and you already have internet, you can go straight away to the terminal and skip this section. If you don't, you're going to want to configure it. I've given you an example of those settings. Enter the subnet. That 9, of course, will be your subnet, .0.24, the IP address of your server as is expected from the router, and the gateway IP and the name servers, which in my case, and you can see they're separated by a comma. There's a screenshot of that, and that is in Ubuntu server. Okay. Now you should see a whirling pipe at the bottom that finally turns into a done button, indicating your network is configured properly and that you are in fact on the internet. Click that done button to commit those changes. You should now be at the configure proxy screen. We're not going to actually configure the proxy at this point. In fact, we want to make sure that we don't install Ubuntu server either. So at this point, we want to go to the terminal prompt, which we're going to do by holding down your alternate key and pressing the F2 key. That'll put you to the terminal. So now all viewers, whether you're using desktop or server install media, are sitting at the terminal and we're ready to proceed. First thing we're going to do is install the software that we might need. So I like to use Vim. You might want to use Nano or whatever you'd like. That's up to you. Open SSH-server and ZFS utils-linux. I think nowadays ZFS utils Linux is on all Ubuntu installs, but some of them may not be, depending on what version you're using. Then we're going to, once we get there, we're going to log in to SSHD, as you see here, etc. SSH, SSHD, and we're going to set permit root login to yes, so that we can then SSH into this and carry this out from the comfort of our own computer. You may be sitting at the server and you don't need to log in from a separate computer if that's the case. In my case, my server's tucked away in a mess of wires in the cabinet back there. So we're going to do this from my desktop where I'm sitting right now. We SSH, first restart the SSH services after you've made those changes, and then SSH in from wherever you'd like to. Okay, it's time to use the ZFS commands. First, our environment assumes that the drives that are corrupted in whatever way are still installed in that same server and that you're booted to right now. Now, you may have a different situation and you can figure out where to fill in the gaps if it's different, but in our case, that's what's happening. And if we do an ls of the /mount directory, we are in fact going to see all the different pools that ZFS has mounted automatically. So it's detected that those are attached, and it's gone ahead and mounted them. In our case, you can see a variety of these are the directories that you would have in your root environment, which is great. And we also see in our case, our backup and our data environment are also attached, which is great. That's what we want to see. We're on the live media. We're looking at our stuff. Now we want to import the mounted pools that we just saw. So to do that, we're going to run zpool import capital R the /mount -a -f. And there is a man page on zpool. If you want, you can go in and dig into these flags. I'm not going to cover them in detail now, but you can see them on the screen. And at that point, we basically imported all of these pools into our live environment so that we can now manage those from the live environment. And now we're going to unmount those pools that were mounted in the previous step that we could see were automatically mounted. So we're going to run ZFS unmount -a, and the reason being a snapshot cannot be rolled back while the pool and its contents are mounted. So we must unmount them before we can work our magic. And we can verify that the ZFS systems are in fact unmounted by doing an ls of that same mount directory we did earlier, and you can see there's nothing in there. It's an empty directory, and that's good news. However, we want to verify that we can still get to our stuff, and the way we can do that is just to type in ZFS list, and you're going to see something like this idea. You can see backup pool, B pool, data pool, R pool. Those are our pool names. Yours may be different. The important thing is that we can see them, that we can interact with them on the ZFS live environment, even though we've unmounted them. Okay, coming back to this. Viewing your snapshots. So right now we viewed our pools. We now want to view the snapshots that we're going to try to restore to roll back to. And the way that we do that, we can do a ZFS list -t snapshot. That'll show us every snapshot, not just a snapshot that we're trying to restore to, but that'll show us every snapshot we've ever taken. And if you want to view those just so you can see that everything is alive and well, you can do it that way. Or you could also put a grep and then after it put in the name of the snapshot that you are in fact wanting to revert back to roll back to. In our case, it's one that we identified as pre-zulip, which we created just before we installed the Zulip software. I wish I took some screenshots of how that installs, the questions of that install of that program were asking me, so that I could further emphasize the importance of taking these snapshots. And of course, anybody that's been in this business long enough is looking at me saying, well, you should have never done that. And of course, you're right about that. Now, first thing we're going to do is a dry snapshot rollback. So up here, we've looked at all the snapshots. We've grepped the one. This is the one we want to roll back to. You have to pick one. But we want to see what those commands would look like. So we're going to type in this ZFS list-t snapshot, just as we did before, grepping for whatever snapshot name you're interested in. And by the way, that can be a partial. You don't have to have an exact or full snapshot name. You can just grep will just take a portion of that and give you the results you need. And then we're going to append this awk command, which by the way, I have to thank developer Daniel over in New Zealand for providing this particular script to me. It's wonderful, and man, he rattled that off like an unconscious maneuver. He had it down. So it's going to take the result of this and print it to the screen. And you see it's going to prepend it with the ZFS rollback -R, and that $1's going to pull from the first portion of this statement and view it on the screen. And by the way, the -R flag, for those that are interested, will delete any snapshots that are more recent than the one we are rolling back to. And that's required, or we can't get there from here. So that step's got to be in the process. The above command, I've just covered that with you. So this is what that dry run looks like. We've run the command, and you can see that it puts ZFS rollback, R, B pool, data pool, R pool, and all the directories within it, because it's a recursive statement. Okay, and now we're going to commit. This is there's no going back from here. Once you've done this, it's going to delete any snapshots newer than this. So you've got to be real certain that that is in fact the snapshot you want. If it was one of the ones that were deleted, the party's over and there's no going back. Okay, so if you like what you see, time to cement it in place. We simply take that very same command and we're going to append it with a pipe symbol and bash. Again, thank you, Daniel. That'll take everything that we've done previously, including the ZFS rollback, and not only print it to the screen, but execute it as a bash script, and each one of those rollbacks will occur. You're not going to get any feedback on that. It may take some time depending on the amount of data involved. When it's finished, if all goes well, you will simply be returned to a command prompt with absolutely no fanfare, no immediate gratification, but no error is better than an error, and so that's okay. And the last thing that you do need to do is a zpool export -A. So from the command line, once you get returned there, you're going to type in that command, and again, that is again only if you're doing this from a live media, as this tutorial is talking about. And by exporting the pool, as it mentions here, the system to which the disks are attached can no longer use it unless you zpool import it again. Well, you won't need to zpool import it on the same server, because that boot environment already knows that it's attached to these drives, and it'll link up automatically. In cases where you are moving drives to a totally different boot environment, you would need to import this zpool in the same way you've just exported it, so that your operating system knows, I'm supposed to use these drives. But that's not the case here. All right, and now reboot your server. You should be operating as it was before your ransomware or any other catastrophe had occurred. So you have officially turned back time. It's amazing. I got to tell you, the moment I rebooted my server, initially it was anticlimactic because I realized my certs were not right on the permissions weren't right on my SSL certs. So that was something else I did. I rectified that. In fact, there's a video elsewhere in my channel about that issue, because I've encountered it before. And Francis, the developer in the Dominican Republic, recognized the problem and helped me work through that. Thank you, Francis, on that one. It saved me yet again this time. And but everything worked. Zulip was completely gone, no traces. Everything was exactly as it was before the catastrophe. So ZFS for the win, and I hope this server helps you avoid some of the meltdown, some of the mental meltdown that I had in my brain when this catastrophe first occurred. Thanks very much for watching. Bye-bye.